Morning, everyone, and welcome to the March 21st work session of the East Hampton Town Board. Carol, would you please? Oh, not Carol. Please read the roll call. We have a new Carol today.
Councilmember Burke Gonzalez.
Present.
Councilmember Lees.
Present but remote.
Okay. Councilmember Overby.
Here.
Councilmember Rogers.
Present.
Supervisor Van Skoyak.
Present. Please join me in saying the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic
for which it stands,
one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Today's meeting will begin with a public portion where any member of the public may address the board on any topic. We ask that you please keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. And anyone here? Yes, Marietta? You come to the podium, please, and state your name for the record.
Good morning, Town Supervisor, Town Board members. My name is Marietta Gavaris, and I am on the Brooks Park Art and Nature Center Committee. On behalf of BPANC, I want to thank the board for funding the condition assessment report and also thank Mike Devonshire and his team for their work and dedication to preservation. We learned from the cave drawings in Spain that for 40,000 years, art has been representational. Then in the 1940s and 50s, a group of artists gathered right here in Springs and started what we now know as abstract expressionism. And in so doing, they created a whole new form of communication. It's quite a big deal. Just as you would not destroy the caves in El Castillo, Spain, you should not demolish what John Mullen called the Cathedral of Abstract Expressionism. The preservation story of this important site has gone national, and history will carefully record those among us that either hindered or helped preserve this culturally important site for future generations. Please make your intentions clear and schedule a funding vote soon. History awaits your decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to address the board this time? Do we have any callers on the line, Jason?
Yes, we do, and I'm unmuting the first one now. 1 second, caller. Oh.
Helen Harrison.
All right, Helen Harrison, you are live and on the air. Yes.
Oh, thank you very much. Yes, Helen Harrison, the director of the Pollock Krasner House and Study Center here in Springs. As I'm sure the board is aware, I was the person who presented the historic survey that actually caused the board to create the Brooks Park local history designation as a historic site back in 2014. Ever since then, I have campaigned strongly for the preservation and interpretation of this site. Two artists who were close friends of Jackson Pollock and Lee Krasner and who contributed significantly to the development of abstract expressionism in the mid-20th century. Their property is a treasure, and it should not be allowed to just fall into disrepair and go away. I know that the budget has increased significantly in the past 9 years since it was designated a town landmark, but I hope that that will not prevent the town from doing the right thing in this case. So I just wanted to add my strong support to what Marietta said and hope that this will move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. Jason, do we have any other callers on the line?
Yes, we do, and I'm unmuting the next one now. Hello, caller, ending 1337. Yes, you're on the air.
Good morning. My name is Erwin Levy. I'm a 34-year resident of Springs. Before I get to Brooks Park, I want to tie it specifically into the mission of Jane Maring's Building Kind East Hampton, which I support and am grateful for. I feel like I'm living in a moment where the current town code is allowing a seismic shift that is visually jarring. We are seeing enormous spec houses shoehorned to quote the architectural critic Paul Goldberger, into completely cleared small lots on Amagansett Handy Lane, changing a piece of Poseyville forever. Iconic Ditch Plains in Montauk has a house whose sheer size seems to loom ominously over the parking lot, a permanent and regrettable result. Massive houses of 14 to 20,000 square feet are obliterating rural vistas and view sheds along Wainscott Hollow Road for all of us forever. And these spec builds even continue in Springs, with $2 to $3 million asking prices on modest Springs streets, places local families used to be able to buy, and my wife and I did back in 1989. Is it a home, or is it part of a portfolio? Is East Hampton a place to extract from or to give back to? Are we a community or a commodity? As for Brooks Park, yes, $3 million be lift, real money, taxpayer-funded money. But the Gardner Homestead on James Lane was a heavy lift, as was the Moran House on Main Street. So was the Hook Green. Duck Creek Farm in Springs was a heavy lift. And the Atlantic Double Dunes, 8.5 Bluff Road acres, purchased by your town board predecessors in 1982 for $300,000. I'll bet anything that was a heavy lift in its day as well. We are at a crossroads here, and Brooks Park is a metaphor for it. We either embrace and celebrate and preserve our history and our rich sense of place, or we don't. I ask most respectfully, please save Brooks Park. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Erwin. Jason, are there any other callers on the line?
We have no other callers on the line.
Is there anyone else in the audience here who would like to speak to the town board at this time during public comment? Yes, Jess? Jess, if you'd please state your name for the record.
Yes, I'm Jess Frost. I'm the executive director of and one of the founders of the Art Center at Duck Creek. And I'm also a member of the Property Management Committee that has been focused on Brooks Park amongst a number of other properties for the past 6 years. I think we've been meeting. I'm not for or against Brooks Park's restoration and use as an art center. What I think is really important, having worked through the development of Duck Creek, which was restored before we moved in, I think it's imperative that everyone in this community understands the ramifications of spending that money on a space that not only the funding, but also the impact on the nature that exists in that area, and also that we are really focused on the purpose of its restoration and the sustainability of the use of that building, because running Duck Creek is not easy. And fundraising and managing a space like that can be unruly. And I think if the town's going to put that kind of money in, we have to know that that space is going to be operating in a way that's really helpful to the local citizens. That's all.
Thank you, Jess. Anyone else wish to address the board? Jason, do we have any more callers on the phone?
No other callers have dialed in.
In that case, we can move on with our agenda. And the first topic for today is Brooks Park assessment findings. And we have Michael Devonshire here to present. Thank you, Michael.
Is this okay?
Yes. Yeah.
I need to turn this over.
Sure.
You need to share the screen on that, so that way on Zoom, someone needs to hit share screen, and then I can go and put it up there for everyone.
That work? Everything good?
Perfect.
There we go.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, and thank you for having us here today. I'm Mike Devonshire from Jan Herd Picorni Associates. This is my business partner, Kurt Hirschberg. And we're here to talk about the buildings, but before I begin the discussion of the buildings, I wanted to put in a plug for an exhibition that's going to be at the Parish Museum this summer on James Brooks paintings. It's not. We're talking, however, about the site that was the home and inspiration for both James Brooks and Charlotte Park, both artists of great renown. Brooks and Park, as I said, were significant artists, if not stars, the way Jackson Pollock was. Although Brooks achieved his greatest accolades as an abstract expressionist, he also is known for his representational works. If you see the mural at LaGuardia Airport, the large mural there is by James Brooks. He was also, interestingly, a well-known combat artist during World War II, his representational period. He later became an abstract expressionist, of course. Charlotte Park, true to the times in which she lived, was generally overshadowed by her partner, her male partner, but achieved some very impressive accolades very late in life. Unfortunately, too late for her to actually, because she suffered from Alzheimer's. She wasn't capable of understanding the significance that she was achieving. Brooks and Park were part of the New York School of Artists and part of the group known as the Irascibles within the abstract expressionist movement, which also included, of course, de Kooning, Motherwell, Ad Reinhardt, Hedda Stern, and of course, Jackson Pollock, who was a great friend of James Brooks. And it was as a friend and fellow artist that Pollock was able to lure Brooks and Park to the East End, first to Montauk and then later to Springs, and that's where they thrived. It was here at the East End that they really thrived and came into their own. The 4 extant buildings that we're dealing with at the site can, unfortunately, very well serve, as we mentioned in our condition assessment, as a case study for deferred maintenance and lack of care. Our investigation of the buildings revealed that the results of which appear to be an amalgam, and of course we know that some of the buildings were actually moved to the site from Montauk, but they were an amalgam of skilled buildings, salvaged. Kurt will talk about some of the salvaged buildings, salvaged artifacts, some skilled work, some unskilled work. It really is a palimpsest of construction and essentially based to the needs of these 2 artists.
We'll start first with the residence structure. The residence, originally a small cottage, moved to the site in 1957. If you look at the large photo on the left, there's a white painted area. The white paint, half of that area on the right-hand side is that original cottage that was buried in. To the right of that, there's a linear wing that was added next. Then the remainder of the painted portion and the gable were added shortly thereafter. And then all the way on the right-hand side, the last terminus wing was added last. Each addition had its own unique detailing, representing an organic evolution of the building, very much capturing the organic nature of the artist's work themselves. In spite of damage from deteriorated roofing, oh, wait a minute, it went on automatic. I'll take it back. Thank you. In spite of damage from deteriorated roofing, broken doors and windows from vandals, and damage to the cladding as a result of accumulation from debris along the base of the walls, the residence is in remarkably good condition structurally. There are no cracks in the foundation. The floors are level within a 1/16 of an inch from one end of the space to the other. The walls are true and level. Even the roof framing and the roofing hasn't sagged over time, especially given its neglected state. The interior is in a similar state. Aside from cleaning of debris resulting from the vandalism, repairing the ceiling at the original cottage where the roof currently leaks, and repairs to some of the cabinetry, the primary issues at the interior are deterioration of paint finishes, as well as upgrades to the building system to make the building usable. Remarkable considering the structure's been neglected for as long as it has. The importance of the residence lies with its vestiges to the Brooks Parks residency. Cabinetry, original and some very creative repurposed cabinetry in a homemade fashion, appliances, some fixtures, and even few possessions of Brooks and Park still remain within that space. What better way to help convey the story of these important local artists, but to present how they lived at this site?
The Brooks Studio, the James Brooks Studio, is arguably the most imposing building on the site and perhaps the most problematic from a construction point of view and from the preservation perspective due to the advanced deterioration of the roof and the clerestory. The partial collapse of the one-story addition is also an issue. This imposing main block, the original structure believed to have been constructed in the 1960s, features an industrial sawtooth roof with north-facing clerestory windows, perfect for an artist studio. The exterior walls of the main block were wood framed but clad in transite, which is unfortunately an asbestos-bearing material, which will have to be remediated. Our structural engineer, however, has assured us that it is within the realm of possibility to essentially lift the roof, disassemble it, and establish a new roof on the existing walls. The building does not have to be demolished. Unfortunately, the storage wing, the one-story storage wing, is beyond salvage and will have to be reconstructed. That said, there are elements of that building that are able to be salvaged and can be reestablished in the new structure. At the interior, the essence of the genius of Brooks is still palpable within the studio. This is where he created his work. His paint materials are still there in some places. Elements of the studio, the walls, the facade windows can all be salvaged, restored, and reset in a restored building. The walls can be restored. The roof and clerestory elements must be carefully removed and replicated. The floor is damaged because of leakage from the roof, but the floor can be easily replaced. As I said, the storage wing of the studio is now too far gone to restore, but elements of that wing can be salvaged and reused on a new wing.
Charlotte Parks' studio, relocated to the site of the 1970s, is perhaps the most compelling of the four structures. Although there's been some vandalism, it's not difficult to imagine that she's only temporarily left the studio. Her painter's stock still hangs from the north door in the interior. The size and nature of her studio simplifies necessary repairs to the foundation. Because it was relocated to the site in a temporary manner, it's got no more of a foundation than a shed would have. The structure can be easily lifted and reset atop new piers. Damage at the exterior cladding is very isolated and directly related to roof deterioration, as well again as accumulated seasonal debris at the base of the walls. Repair and replacement to damaged doors and windows, as well as the roofing and skylight, are fairly simple and straightforward given the size and lack of complexity of the structure. The interior of the Park Studio is the most compelling space at the site. Unfortunately, debris from vandalism overpowers the remarkable preservation, even in its neglected state. Carefully cataloging of artifacts, again, paint supplies are still there. Her smock is still on the door. Cataloging all these, removing the debris, selective repair of interior finishes, very minor repair, and repainting could easily be facilitated to bring the space back to life again. Reconfiguring one door, and it could be the door that's heavily damaged, with vandal-resistant acrylic could permit the structure to serve as a viewport in the park's life without the need for elaborate programming or expense, forever preserving her legacy within the community.
The guest cottage. The least architecturally impressive building on the site, nevertheless, with no less cultural significance than the other buildings. During the Brooks Park occupancy, it was used by a number of important artistic figures, friends of James and Charlotte, that included Jackson Pollock among the other abstract expressionist artists. It will be a simple feat, like Charlotte's studio, to lift this building, perform foundation repairs, put the building back on the foundation, and perform exterior and interior repairs. It's not too difficult to imagine Jackson Pollock sleeping off a bender in this cabin.
We could put a little plaque out that says Pollock passed out here.
And so, as a preservationist, I will leave you with that. I couldn't have said it better myself. Please save these buildings.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
Board members have questions at this point? I think, for us, understanding, what can be salvaged, how it can be salvaged is an important step. We heard one comment earlier from a community member who, urged us to focus on how to take a comprehensive overall view of this property and to think about how we can not only just preserve the buildings, but how this property will be used in the future, have a structure in place. It suffers from being a rather isolated location. So I think it will be incumbent on us to figure out a way to restore these buildings and secure them in a way that they won't be vandalized in the future. For instance, it's a rather large property, somewhat remote, 11 acres. And that's been a problem for us up to this point, and just trying to get to a point where we can move forward. There's been a fair amount of additional damage done to the structures from vandals over time. So we have to figure out how to address that as well. I think one of the things that's changed somewhat recently is that a determination has been made that historic structures can house individuals, provided that they are docents or manage the properties in which they reside. That, I think, for me, is somewhat of a game changer in that this property could be benefited by having someone caretaking it, if you will.
Yeah, and I think Kurt would agree. There actually could be a portion of the residence
Absolutely.
that could be sectored off and made into a small residence for a site security docent.
So, and then in terms of how we take on this challenge, because all the buildings need help. Some of them less than others, like Charlotte's studio, as you said, could relatively easily and inexpensively, by comparison, be restored. Again, without having that security on site.
Absolutely. And the one advantage to that is the seed project. You do something like Charlotte's studio, you get that up and running, you simply interpret it so you don't need docents there. And once you've got a presence there, that's going to be a tremendous asset applying for grants.
Yeah, security is a great aspect.
Yeah.
It's really going to be important. And as we mentioned in our report, one of the important things is to get Brooks Studio stabilized, secured, so that no more damage occurs. But we were remarking on our way out here this morning, Charlotte Park Studio looks not unlike many suburban garages that you see. If you had a crew in there for one day, you could clean that up so that it would look like she'd just gone out for coffee.
Right.
It's really just the mess that's been left by vandals.
So I think you'll agree that the Brooks Studio is the one that's at greatest risk in terms of collapsing
It is.
and needs to be addressed.
But
First, in terms
as
of
our
stabilizing.
structural engineer indicated, the roof could collapse. The walls are still intact. The walls are still plumb, and they're still in relatively good condition with just two punch-out areas where they're attached to the roof. But if the roof could be disassembled, that building, the rest of that building can be saved with the exception of the storage wing.
So for me, an outline as to how best to proceed to take on this, should the board decide to move forward, is very helpful. Planning a strategy for what buildings to deal with first, and also having that overall, I guess, idea as to how the property will be managed going forward. And that's something we've had, some initial conversations with a group who's interested in taking that on, and that's gained, I think, a fair amount of momentum.
And it may be important for you financially, of course, but the project can also be phased so that those really high priority items can be taken care of first, and the other buildings, for instance, her studio, the guest cottage, can be mothballed and put off to a later time.
So I just want to add, my thanks to Mike and Kurt. Nice to meet you and have you here today. I think the town is committed to this project, as it should be. The CPF is now, something that we can use as part of the funding for this project. And I want to end with something that Mike Solomon said, whose father was part of the abstract expressionist, Sid Solomon, and someone who was on the property with Charlotte Parks. He gave a lecture at LVIS. It was very interesting. This past fall, actually, is when it was. What he said to me and stuck in my head is that there are three things that are uniquely American: jazz, baseball, and the abstract expressionists. We are at the forefront in East Hampton at being allowed to be part of that history. And it's a privilege to be there. And we should make sure that we embrace it.
Something that we mentioned to Peter earlier today, Kurt was the project manager for the restoration of the Nathan Rogers House in Bridgehampton, for which CPF funds were used.
Yeah.
So
Including replication work.
he'd be happy to discuss that with you.
That's great. Great news. Thank you.
So Sylvia, what do you see as the next steps as far as this is concerned? Are we looking to enter into a license agreement with the folks that are looking to do the Brooks Park Arts and Nature Center, and they are partners in this? Is there, I was under the impression that they were also looking for space there to hold community programs. I mean, once restored, which of these buildings could we hold community programs in, if any?
The studio is a large enough space.
Okay.
Brooks Studio is a large enough space that you could have public assembly inside that. It's a big building.
And for smaller scale, the main room of the residence could definitely be used as well.
Okay.
And that could be used with minimal intervention right now.
And again, I'll just reiterate, having a firm idea as to what pathway where we want to end up as an end goal is going to inform how we move forward now, obviously. But for instance, public assembly has certain requirements in terms of meeting building and safety standards, which we know from going through several years of trying to find a pathway forward through our town property management committee that looked at this property to try and figure out how to bring it back to life. And so I think a couple of important things have changed. As I mentioned, the ability to be able to fund a large portion of the restoration work through CPF. The fact that could have someone managing the property, living on site, which I think is an important aspect. And we have a community organization that has coalesced around this, which what has been lacking, for this period of time from when we first acquired the property. The people have to understand we acquired it as open space. It was 11 acres of land, and the dilapidated buildings were to be destroyed, demolished and removed, the site restored to its natural state. And then we had some community members who knew the history of these individuals and their importance in the bigger scheme of things, who came forward and said, wait, stop, give us a timeout. And we've been in limbo really ever since. So I'm hoping now there's enough momentum and that this group coalescing around this effort will help guide us forward so we can actually make this property, I think, a beacon for the abstract expressionist movement, which is unique to us here in East Hampton, in Springs particularly, in New York, and is a internationally known and acclaimed form of art. And please take a little time on your way out of the building to walk around the different offices and look at our very own Elizabeth Parker Anderson, who we acquired her house and is now the Springs Library. There are 40 some odd paintings of hers that we rescued from the attic that had been neglected and lost there, abandoned, and they're really remarkable works. I have several in my office, and they really grow on you. So take a little time and look at those on the way out.
Beautiful. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you.
So if I can just have a couple of comments. Mike and Kurt, this is Council Member David Lees. I apologize for not being present today. I have a family member that's not feeling so well. When it comes to next steps, and first of all, I thank you very much for putting the history and the connections together of Brooks and Park to the community and to the other artisans that are in the area. I think it's very important for the public to know that also, because it's not as well known maybe in some light. So by using this forum, I think it's great then too. As far as next steps, I think what you did is enlighten the board to artifacts that are there. I think I would like to see those artifacts being either work with the organization, the Brooks Park organization, to store those immediately right now. I think what we've just done is we just actually highlighted them, and that puts value to them and attractiveness to them. So I think there's a very important thing we should do to try to secure them in a safe manner if they would be used in a retrospect later on, as you said, a view-only resource. I would fear that this conversation would lead to more vandalism and more eyes on it. So I think that would be very important as far as the next step there then too. Secondly, the Brooks studio is about, as you said, 757 square feet, and then the storage is about 528 square feet. The interior of that view wasn't shown. The I-beam that is non-original to the structure is almost collapsing on it. I still personally believe that structure is an attractive nuisance just from a structural aspect on it. It's not saying I'm supporting or against any of this project at all, but that structure needs to take the care that it needs to immediately. I would be very careful about any action that someone would have to take on it. I'm surprised to have even individuals walk in there to do this type of. I'm not necessarily surprised. I'm very careful to allow individuals in that building right now, based on the state of it, as you gentlemen saw then too. So, as far as the next steps, to see if there's portions of that could be saved on there, either from the asbestos or from just the natural. It's dangers that are there. I think you should do that sooner than later, too, because that I-beam has fallen and dropped a good 2 feet, maybe if not more since, and we know that people are going in there. I'm looking at safety first, and that's what that is. On some of the estimates of cost, I'm just wondering two things. As Peter had mentioned, if this is a public use facility, we have to make sure it meets ADA standards, and also for bathrooms. I didn't see that in there. I don't know if that was in the cost estimate. I just want to make sure that any of the cost estimate will also have the prevailing wage on there then too. So I know that you're looking at nearly $3 million here for interior and exterior. And I didn't know if that was included.
It is.
Good.
Also to add in that, we have figured new bathrooms that would be ADA compliant in there, new mechanical systems. And we've also tried to base the numbers on our experience working here on the east end of Long Island, what your costs are here. So we've tried to make them as realistic as possible and include some padding for escalation as well.
I appreciate that. And as you said, the phased-in approach sometimes escalates even more, but allows for greater creativity and funding sources. I'm always concerned about long-term maintenance and, what it puts onto our resources of staffing on there. But what I think you have done with this one, also with the other reports that have been done previously by Drew Bennett and such, I think it pretty much completes what the structural assessment of these properties, and you two have added on more of the historical complexity to it, which is great to see. So I appreciate Sylvia bringing that forward to get this done, because it does, to make a good decision, you have to be knowledgeable. And this actually informed me even more than I had before. So I thank you too for that, and I apologize for not being there today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments for Michael or Kurt?
So I'd like to ask Michael what he thinks the next step should be.
Securing the site,
Securing the site.
keeping the vandals out, and as the councilman just said, just announcing that there are artifacts in these buildings in a forum like this may attract more people who aren't necessarily vandals, but people who want to collect artifacts. The fact that Charlotte's smock is still hanging from the door is really amazing and extremely evocative. There are paint cans lined on a shelf within Brooks' studio that any museum would want to get a hold of these things. And so securing the site, absolutely securing the site, to me is the next step. And again, that will keep people out of that building so that there isn't as much of a safety risk in the Brooks studio.
Yeah, I believe we have a 6-foot chain link fence around the studio, which
I think someone got over the fence and they got into the storage shed. So barbed wire and electrical system and guard dogs might be.
So picking up on that, past securing the site, what's next for us? We get a phased approach from you?
I think a phased approach makes sense. One component I see, stabilizing the roof structure or taking the roof structure off of the Brooks studio would be coming up early in the process. I also think a temporary roof on the residence, the guest cottage, and Charlotte's studio would
tarping.
Absolutely, just to keep the elements out and keep the deterioration from getting any worse. It'll buy you time.
We did a lot of work in New Orleans after Katrina, and it actually gets to a point where if the tarps that you've installed start to deteriorate, that starts to put heat under people to keep things moving. So you start with the tarps and that applies the fire.
Yeah.
Great. Anything else?
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Michael, Kurt, thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Airport Secra, and I believe we have Peter Farreau and Dan Rudso.
Both of them are in the waiting room, and they are coming in right now.
Great.
Good morning.
Morning, Peter.
And I believe Dan is, oh, there's Dan.
And Dan's joining us as well. I believe there's Dan. Good morning, Dan.
Hi.
Welcome, gentlemen. And you're here to take us through the most recent installment of Airport Secra.
Okay, so what we have presenting today is the version of the final scope that is reflective of some input we have received from members of the board as well as our team. We have a PowerPoint presentation. We posted or had posted on your site all of the scope itself and all of its attachments and figures that have been referenced in it. And so that's that's been available for public review as well as your own review. We have a short presentation to sort of walk you through what we have done with the comments that we've received in this process, and then sort of next steps. And the next immediate step would be taken at your, I believe it's your April 6th board meeting, regular board meeting, which if again, assuming you're satisfied with the current state of the draft, the final scope would be adopted by resolution. But Peter, let me turn it over to you. Maybe we'd start through the presentation.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. And so again, just brief presentation. We've seen this before, but just to reorient everyone, the town is proposing long-term operational policies at the East Hampton Town Airport to regulate flight operations. And the town also wants to study the potential impacts of permanent closure of the town airport, both when legally permissible to do so. And because implementing those restrictions is a discretionary action of the town board, it's subject to SECRA, which requires the town take a hard look at the potential environmental impacts, as well as study alternatives and allow for public participation. So where we've been already in the EIS process is that a draft GEIS scope or table of contents was published on December 15th. Public comment was received by the town board through January 27th, so about a month and a half or so. That included a public scoping session on January 17th at a town board work session. Where we are in the process now is that when the town board is satisfied with edits to the draft scope, it will adopt that as the final scope. And as you can see with all this white space, there's a lot more process to go through. So once that scope is adopted, the draft GEIS would actually be prepared. The goal is to have a complete draft GEIS by the summer of this year. At that point, that draft EIS would be published for public comment. There would be a public hearing, public comment period. Then there would be a final GEIS in which comments on the DEIS were responded to. Then a finding statement, which is the town board's decision document, presents the rationale and the way that the town board weighed and balanced the environmental impacts and the other benefits and impacts of the proposed restrictions. And then once that finding statement is adopted, it concludes seeker, and the town board may take action on the underlying action, those restrictions, when it's legally permissible. So right now, we're up at this draft GEIS scope. And so what we presented to you and is published on the website is our recommendations for updating the scoping outline that was originally presented back in December. So the town board received more than 30 commenters commented on this. So in addition to the scoping document itself, we added a response to comments document. It's not required by seeker, but consistent with what the town did last year, as well as its goal of being as transparent and open as possible. We added that response to comment document. It's also important to note that this scope did benefit from the more than 500 commenters that commented on the February 2022 scope. So there has been significant public input on the contents of what would be studied. So the scope and the methodology was revised where it was warranted and as discussed in that response to comments document. So
I would just note that's the attachment C in the materials that were provided to you and posted.
thank you. Yep, that is the response to comment is in attachment C. So the scoping outline, as we talked about last time, begins with an estimate of the changes in flight patterns that could occur with the implementation of the operational policies. And so we made a few changes within that section of the scope based on public comments, trying to simplify how the existing conditions were defined and characterized, and how the no action condition is defined. The no action condition is the baseline for the EIS, and it's defined as that condition that could occur in the future without the proposed project. So what would the future look like without the proposed project, which is where we kind of break out our crystal balls and try to figure that out. But what we've done, again, is really tried to simplify and clarify this. So the existing conditions we had done in October to November, or November to October, excuse me, timeframe. We decided let's just make it a lot more simple and put it to a calendar year. We don't need to kind of try and do anything else. And then for the no action condition, really what we're trying to do is, again, ensure that the town board is looking at the maximum potential for impacts to the other airports and the areas around those other airports. And so we've clarified again how we're measuring that baseline condition. We added analyses of emergency services and providers, analyses of LWRPs, the towns, the Village of Sag Harbor, including sea level rise. We added an analysis of the potential for the introduction of electric aircraft to affect aircraft noise in and around East Hampton Town Airport and the other 3 airports. This will be somewhat qualitative, as there aren't a lot of published noise data out there for electric aircraft. Right, none have actually, to my knowledge, have been certified yet. So some of this will be qualitative, but commenters pointed out that this was likely something that could come in the next couple of years and would be important for the town to understand. Most of the rest of the analyses, the traffic and transportation, energy, air quality, climate change, stayed pretty much the same, some minor tweaks, but the one difference in the alternatives is that commenters, there was an alternative in the scope that said we should look at potential different restrictions. What are the environmental impacts of flight restrictions that are different from what the town board is proposing? Commenters asked for additional specificity on what those alternatives would be or could be. And so we did add those in about what those additional alternative restrictions might look like and what we're going to study. So the next step related to seeker, as Dan said, is that we're reviewing these updated scoping documents at today's work session. If the town board is satisfied with these revisions, could adopt them by resolution on April 6th. Then the consultant team and the town staff would prepare the DGEIS, we'll collect the data, we'll undertake the analyses, and by the end of the summer, we're hoping to have the draft DGEIS published for public comment. And that's when the next opportunity for public comment on the DGEIS would occur. So targeting summer, fall of this year for that public comment period. The town then is required to respond to all substantive comments on the DGEIS in that final EIS, and then ultimately prepare the finding statement. So that's just a brief snapshot of where we are. Happy to answer any questions, provide additional information.
Yeah, a final EIS, in addition to containing the response to comments, which is a sort of fundamental, important element of a final EIS. Any revisions, if things are pointed out to us through the public comment period about, oh, gee, you should have looked at this, or in looking at this, you ignored this or that, we can revise the impact section, if you will, of the EIS to reflect the most current information available. And in respect to information that we developing information about electric aircraft, for example, there have been a couple of news stories in the last few months about not a lot of detail, but news stories about either helicopters or small planes. As that information comes available, we can include it in the draft, and if necessary, additional information in the final. But the idea is to when the final EIS is available, is to put you in the best position to make judgments about what the implications are of the proposed PPR, each one of the separate suggestions that are in that PPR plan, as well as the potential for closure of the airport and the implications for that. But it'll be, it'll enable you to make a decision on it that is informed with all of this best available information. We've talked a little bit about, working through the document itself and sharing internally, those documents over the next few months. We will keep you apprised as pieces develop to the point where they're sort of ready for your review. People will be marching on. We're continuing to collect information, update information that is available, check. We'll be following up with 8 other agencies that have information that is pertinent to the collection of data, your sister municipalities that are potentially affected. Again, if any issues come up, we will alert you to that and ask for your assistance if necessary.
Thank you, Dan. At this point, is the board comfortable with the draft scope? Or are there any other changes or comments about?
I don't have any comments.
Personally, I think it's ready to go.
Yep.
I do as well.
Okay, well, we'll have as I shared with John Jelnicki earlier, we'll have a draft resolution ready for your next meeting, and we go from there.
Thanks.
Very good. So we'll see that on the 6th, I guess.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you so much, gentlemen.
All right. No, thank you. And thank you for your responsiveness and input. It's really helpful.
Next up, we have the annual piping plover report. We have Anna Sikorsky here from Natural Resources. Good morning, Anna.
Good morning. Is that sharing okay on Zoom?
No, it's not sharing yet. If you could just hit share again on Zoom. Oh, there you go. Screen sharing now. Thank you.
Great.
Perfect.
And is this the wireless clicker as well? I'll just have you do that. Changing. Good morning, Town Board.
Morning.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm Anna Sikorsky, an environmental analyst in the Natural Resources Department. And today, on behalf of my team, I will be sharing the results from our 2022 Endangered Species Management Program and providing some of our goals for this upcoming season. So to quickly overview the program, you can go to the next slide. The town assists the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and the New York State DEC in conservation efforts for beach nesting birds and rare beach vegetation. Although we do monitor several protected species, our program largely centers on the piping plover, which is an endangered and admittedly sometimes controversial shorebird that nests on town beaches between March and September each year. As part of these efforts, we record quite a bit of information about piping plovers, including their numbers, nest locations, hatch and fledge dates, and this ultimately helps us to, number one, make informed local conservation decisions about piping plovers, and secondly, allow the public to continue using our beaches. To take a closer look at the piping plover, they are small territorial nesting shorebirds that are currently listed as federally threatened and New York State endangered. They are also protected under the Migratory Bird Treaty Act and the Endangered Species Act, which makes it illegal to kill, harm, harass, possess, or remove piping plovers. Or some facts and hopefully fun facts about the species. Yeah, as you can see in the top photo there, their nests and eggs are extremely well camouflaged to the sand, being just these small depressions or scrapes that are often lined with rocks or shells. And so they can be very easy to miss both in person and in photographs. Plover chicks are very small and downy and really adorable. They actually weigh less than a single scoop of ice cream when they're first hatched. Chicks are also precocial, which means that they can walk or forage by themselves within just a few minutes of hatching. And they're also extremely mobile. So I often think of them as these little wind-up toys that make abrupt dashes and pauses. And they'll pretty much use the entire beach area to forage or find places to rest. And this is a main reason why we have to actually have larger dedicated areas to help protect them. When it comes to the top threats, predation from species like raccoons, gulls, and crows, human disturbance, and coastal development are some of the core challenges that are facing plovers today. Piping plovers are actually present in several parts of North America with 3 different populations, including in the Northern Great Plains, which is the largest population, the Great Lakes, which is the smallest population, and then in the Atlantic coast, which are the plovers that we have nesting here in East Hampton. And within the Atlantic coast population, there are 4 different recovery units, which include Atlantic Canada, New England, Southern, and then New York and New Jersey, which is the unit that we belong to. In total, there are surprisingly only about 8,000 breeding pairs that remain throughout North America. And I think this really underscores this very urgent need to continue managing and protecting the species moving forward. So what is really the end goal of our conservation efforts? Ultimately, we're striving to delist the Atlantic coast population from the Endangered Species Act. And in order to do so, we primarily have to meet 2 criteria that were established by the, oh, it's the previous slide, sorry, Melanie. So it's 2 criteria that were established by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service in 1996. The first of these is that we have to achieve and maintain 2,000 breeding pairs among the 4 recovery units for 5 consecutive years, and 575 pairs need to come from New York and New Jersey specifically. Secondly, we have to achieve a mean productivity of 1.5 fledged chicks per breeding pair, again among the 4 recovery units for 5 consecutive years. As you can see in the 2 graphs, the New York, New Jersey recovery unit has not yet met these criteria successfully over the past 30 years. Based on the latest data that we do have, the 5-year New York, New Jersey average was 521 breeding pairs and 1.34 fledges per pair. So although we've definitely made progress and improvements, we candidly do still have more work to do. And our program will very much continue to be a central component for ensuring that piping plovers are here for generations to come. And so now I will take you through the highlights and results from the 2022 nesting season. So each year we monitor approximately 18 miles of bay and ocean beaches for piping plovers, which are all listed here. And the management area includes all the beaches that are within the town and the village, but excludes all federal, county, and state-owned land, which gets managed separately by these groups. We also do our best to actively share nest locations and fledge dates with the town board, the trustees, and other departments and stakeholders to help support the overall management process. So as in previous years, we began the nesting season by setting up symbolic string fencing and signage at the end of March to help protect nesting areas. Our fencing and restrictions do vary. So when there are only nests present, our fencing is just around the upper portion of the beach, and we ask that people, dogs, and vehicles kindly respect these boundaries. But once the chicks do hatch, because of their high mobility, we extend the fencing to then be perpendicular to the water. So the entire area from the dune line to the water line is completely closed to vehicles and dogs, but people can still walk through the area. The length of the fencing depends largely on the observed movement and range of plover pairs. And it's important to note that all of this fencing is temporary. So we keep a close eye on clutch completion dates, hatch and fledge dates to really try to ensure that fencing is only in place for the amount of time that's necessary to ensure successful productivity. So every year we also monitor nests on a case-by-case basis to determine whether exclosures might be helpful to use. So as you can see in the image, wire exclosures are designed to really keep both terrestrial and aerial predators out while allowing the plover adults to move freely to and from the nest during the incubation period. In 2022, we decided not to exclose any nests. And this was in part due to the fact that exclosures can be stressful to birds. And we're also noticing that predators are beginning to associate an exclosure with a nesting site. So crows will actually especially be very patient and just wait nearby the exclosure for the adults or chicks to move away from the protected area. So it's definitely a strategy we're still evaluating on when it can be effective, but it's something that we're using more cautiously now. When it comes to the data from 2022, we had a total of 24 breeding pairs that successfully fledged 26 chicks, resulting in an overall productivity rate of 1.08. This is down slightly from the 2021 season and still below the target productivity of 1.5 fledges per pair. As you can see in the chart, productivity really hit this peak in 2015 and 2016, which were both great plover seasons, but it has remained relatively constant before and after this point. Georgia Capon and Atlantic Avenue were our most productive sites last year, followed by 2 Mile, Sammy's, and Main Beach, and these generally align with some of the sites that have been the most productive historically. So once we gather all of this data, we submit it to the DEC, and they're then collating information from other municipalities across Long Island to get a sense for plover presence and productivity statewide. So that's really what our data is being used to help inform. And before wrapping things up, I also wanted to just take a few minutes to highlight some of our goals for 2023. I think we're really looking to hopefully incorporate some new and exciting elements to the program, which we're looking forward to sharing. The first of these is that we've created some new plover signs to denote nesting areas. A few of the example mock-ups are provided on the slide. So we're excited to have some fresh designs to put out near nesting sites this season. We're also planning to install some motion-activated camera traps near priority nesting areas. So cameras help provide some photo evidence that can help us to identify predators and other causes of nest loss, and then confirm hatching and fledge dates. The cameras do all have an infrared flash that's invisible to wildlife, and so it should help, mitigate any disturbance to the birds. And data from camera traps has helped other researchers and municipalities inform their management strategies. So we think the tool will be just as beneficial for our town as well. Another area that we're excited about for 2023 is increasing some public outreach. So we're actively in conversation with Audubon New York to become a part of what's called their Be a Good Egg campaign. And this program is aiming to reduce human disturbance to coastal birds by encouraging people to find ways to share the shore with them. Other Long Island municipalities, including the towns of Hempstead and Oyster Bay, also partake in this initiative, so we would be joining, a much larger effort. Within the partnership, we're exploring two main ideas. The first of these is that we've scheduled an art contest with the 5th grade class at the Amagansett School. So this would work by having a presentation by our department staff on piping plovers and other, endangered shorebirds. And after this, the students would then work with their art teacher to create these really colorful and informative signs that you can see there. The signs can then be weatherproofed and posted near nesting sites or also in other town locations. So we're hoping this would be, a fun and engaging way to get students and families in the community involved. Our second idea, as you'll see in the bottom photo, is to host some beach table sessions on priority bay and ocean beaches. This event would be hosted by the Natural Resources Department, Audubon New York, and hopefully some U.S. Fish and Wildlife representatives. And during the event, we would hand out educational materials like flyers or brochures and encourage people to sign what's called the Be a Good Egg Pledge, which just lists a few actions that the public can take to help people, share the shore with shorebirds and take action to help save them. So we're hoping that these efforts will help get the community involved and just help spread awareness about all the great work that the town's doing for piping plovers. The last thing I'll mention is that we're hoping to bring on some additional staff members for the program this year, which would include a seasonal intern to support some townwide monitoring efforts, and then hopefully 1 or 2 plover stewards that can really be site specific and take on larger areas like Montauk or Georgia Beach and Pond. I'll also give the pitch that we're accepting some volunteers for 2023 and are always really grateful for the support of residents and the public that want to get involved in this work. So just to give you a sense for what we require, after receiving some initial training from our department, we typically ask volunteers to help us monitor a specific site about once per week and then share their observations with us. So those that are interested in volunteering or learning more about the opportunity can either call the department or shoot me an email, and both of those are provided on the slide there. So I think that about wraps it up, but more than happy to take any questions, and thanks for
Thank you,
listening.
Anna. Questions or comments?
No, first I'd like to comment and thank you and the Natural Resources Department for all the work that you do, collecting the data and participating in the regional program, as well as helping the town be in compliance with the Federal Endangered Species Act. All very important things. Do you have an idea on the what's fluctuating in the productivity and why some beaches have a higher productivity than others?
I think it's a combination of factors. I mean, sometimes it has to do with the amount of habitat that's available for them. Some beaches can be narrower, and that can limit the amount of space that plovers are ultimately able to use effectively. Certain sites have a higher level of human disturbance. Some might be more popular to people using the beach. Vehicles might frequent the area. And then storm events can also really impact some sites being more successful than others as well. Especially ocean sites might be more prone to the impacts of nor'easters or other flooding events compared to bay sites. So I think it's a variety of factors that contribute to some areas being more productive than others.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I was a little surprised that Atlantic Avenue Beach was one of the sites that had the fledglings, was most productive this season, because I consider that a pretty active beach. So I'm actually glad to hear that that happened at that site. Who took all the photographs?
So some of these are from the town that we've taken, but other photographs are just pulled from other photographers or online sources.
Okay, they're really stunning. They really are stunning. So thank you. It makes the report very compelling.
Yeah, absolutely. Glad you enjoyed them.
Yeah, so the message, the takeaway is there are opportunities to work as stewards in the Plover program.
Yes.
So contact Natural Resources Department if you'd like to volunteer. And I think it's important to restate this being a nationally protected endangered species, that we have a responsibility to manage them within our jurisdiction, and managing ensures that the vast majority of our beaches stay open because we're able to locate where the nesting pairs are, where the fledglings are, and protect them in those locations rather than a blanket closure that could be imposed upon us by the federal government if we weren't following proper management of the species. So people should please abide by the signage and the string fencing and the other fencing as the season progresses. There's plenty of room on the beach for everybody to coexist. And it's a great part of our natural history right here. Love the photographs. I think Natural Resources should maybe think about putting together a little gift shop.
A calendar.
Thank you,
Photographs,
notes.
a little
Natural Resources
stuff,
calendar.
Plovers and hats.
Yeah, I agree.
Anna, can I just ask you a question? You talked about the motion activated cameras. Are they at all of the sites or just the top producing sites?
So most likely the ones that are top producing. And then we'll also take into account whether there's a lot of theft that might occur on certain beaches. And so the cameras will be locked to reduce the likelihood that they would be stolen, but we'll certainly take that into account because I think certain areas might be more prone to it based on, historical issues.
So we haven't used cameras in the past, and this is or we have.
I'm not sure. We did have someone. Okay, so we might have used it in the past, but I think we're trying to put out an additional 5 to 6 to 7 this season. So we'll have more data than we might have had in the past.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna.
Thank you, Anna.
Thank you very much.
Well done.
Next on the agenda, we have the Wellness 60 Plus programs, and we have Diane Patrizio, our Director of Human Services here. Present.
Good morning, Town Supervisor and Town Board members. Do you need me to do that?
Morning.
Okay. I'm here to present information about a new program in the Human Services Department, Programs for the Aging. 2023 welcomes the creation of a new program within the Human Services Department. In response to a demographic change with our older residents living longer and healthier, Human Services is increasing wellness activities and educational programs and clubs designed to meet the needs and interests of our 60 and over community. This United States Census Bureau chart shows the projected number of children and older adults. And for the first time in U.S. history, older adults are projected to outnumber children by 2034.
Yeah.
In this chart, the Brookings Institute scholars used Gallup polls to show the relationship between age and well-being. Respondents rated their life satisfaction relative to best possible life for them. People aged 60 and older generally have a greater sense of well-being than younger people have. In one large study from the Brookings Institute, for example, scientists found happiness was high for 18 to 21-year-olds and then dropped steadily until about age 40. But past middle age, the pattern began to reverse, gradually climbing back up to its highest point at 98. Aging
You
also,
get to 98. you get
Really?
Satisfaction.
Yes.
I think that's when
Aging
your
brings-
kids stop asking you for money.
Maybe.
Maybe. Then your
aging
grandkids
brings
are asking.
a greater acceptance of ourselves and our lives, no matter how difficult circumstances may be at times. It's not that conditions necessarily get better as we age, it's that we have a chance to let go of our expectations and be more realistic about life's up and downs. People with a more positive attitude about growing old tend to live longer and healthier lives than those with negative thoughts about aging, according to recent research. A study of 14,000 adults over age 50, co-authored by the experts at Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health, found that the people who had the highest satisfaction with aging had a 43% lower risk of dying from any cause over a 4-year period compared with those who were the least satisfied. The study also found that people more satisfied with the aging process had lower risks for conditions such as diabetes, stroke, cancer, and heart disease, better cognitive functioning, were more likely to engage in physical activity, and less likely to have trouble sleeping, were less lonely and depressed, and were more optimistic with a greater sense of purpose. Suggestions on how to develop a more positive attitude about aging: maintain a sense of purpose by finding projects that align with your values. Reject negative stereotypes about aging, such as the idea that poor physical health is inevitable for older adults. Stay socially active, for instance, by joining a club or getting involved with a community organization, or try new activities or teach skills or crafts to others. Research also shows that people who participate in hobbies and social and leisure activities may be at lower risk for some health problems. So your favorite activities are not only fun, they may be good for your health. Research on music, theater, dance, creative writing, and other participatory arts shows a promise for improving older adults' quality of life and well-being, from better cognitive function, memory, and self-esteem, and reduced stress, and increased social interaction. Regular exercise can help older adults stay independent and prevent many health problems that come with age. According to the 2018 Physical Activity Guidelines for Americans, older adults should do 2 types of physical activities each week to improve their health: aerobic and muscle strengthening. These guidelines recommend that older adults engage in at least 150 minutes of moderate intensity or 75 minutes of vigorous aerobic activity a week and muscle strengthening activities on 2 or more days a week. So what can you do? Look for opportunities to participate in activities. So meet our Wellness 60 Plus team. Jackie Jackson is our yoga instructor. Lisa Taylor, Kimberly Kluge, and Dr. Margaret Iacone are all wellness instructors as well. And they participate through our partnership with Southampton Stony Brook Hospital's Wellness Institute. Oscar Giles is our new balance and self-defense instructor. He started yesterday. Lee Frankel is a wellness instructor as well through our partnership with the YMCA. And Lydia Burns is our meditation instructor. Jackie Jackson teaches chair yoga, floor yoga, and afternoon yoga at the East Hampton Senior Center and Ashwag Hall. Jackie has been teaching yoga for over 60 years. Jackie believes that yoga is for anybody at any level. Her hope is that her students will realize the wonderful nature of the human body and advises her students to focus on 3 things: mind, body, and breath. I was breathing a lot back there before I went on. Jackie believes yoga is the balancing act that works. As yoga stretches, tones, and strengthens your body, Yoga concentrates, organizes, and strengthens your mind, and yoga can transform your life. Dr. Margaret Iacone teaches at the East Hampton Senior Center, the Montauk Playhouse, and Ashwag Hall. She teaches Qigong, Qigong 3, and Healing Circle. She's a licensed acupuncturist, earning a master's degree in Oriental Medicine from New York College of Health Professionals and a doctorate from the Pacific College of Oriental Medicine. She has received certifications in Qigong, Tai Chi, disciplines specializing in programs for seniors and cancer patients. She's worked at the Stony Brook Hospital Wellness Institute since 2014, and during the past 6 years, she's conducted classes at the East Hampton and Montauk Senior Centers, Healing Circle, and Qigong. She instructs seniors in nutrition and exercise classes. Lydia Burns teaches mindfulness meditation at the East Hampton Senior Center and the Montauk Playhouse. Lydia is passionate about supporting your health and overall wellness and adding a touch more positivity to our community and the world. Do you want to strengthen your body and calm your mind while winding down and relaxing? Then please join Lydia. She's led mindfulness classes for 30 years since her start at Gurney's Inn and has continued to help heal and restore comfort and joy throughout her life's work as a public health nurse. Oscar Giles teaches balance and self-defense at the East Hampton Senior Center. He's a high-ranking black belt and a former instructor at Delhi, New York, a BOCES night class instructor, and taught at the East Hampton Juvenile Aid Bureau. His tournament experience includes 15 years in the International Martial Arts Federation. Oscar's class will empower you with higher self-esteem, physical conditioning, flexibility, strengthening, and stamina. Kimberly Kluge also is part of the Stony Brook Southampton Hospital Wellness Group. She teaches bar, sculpt, and stretch at the East Hampton Senior Center. She found her love of bar while taking classes for her own enjoyment. She holds certification in yoga, Pilates, meditation, and has over 10 years experience teaching fitness. She focuses her classes on core strength, flexibility, and fun. She was inspired by her grandmother, who was an avid yogi. Changing career paths after leaving the mortgage industry and following her love of yoga, she uses postures, relaxation techniques, and breath work, and she shares her passion with students of all ages and skill levels. Lisa Taylor also works as part of the Stony Brook Southampton Wellness Institute. She teaches mindful movement at the Senior Center. She's a certified Pilates instructor, dancer, and movement educator. She believes firmly in the power of movement to heal. She's passionate about well-being, motivated by a mission to inspire in each and every individual a healthier, more positive relationship with movement and the body. Grounded in the joys of dance, strategic knowledge of anatomy and kinesiology, and foundational Pilates principles of breath, clarity, and mindfulness, her classes will lead you through low-impact, empowering, and restorative movement to help you discover the power in you. Lee Frankel teaches osteoporosis prevention and stretching at Ashwag Hall. She's part of our cooperative agreement with the YMCA. She's ACE certified in group and personal training, certified in LSVT, certified training for Parkinson. She's a bones and balance instructor, and she's employed at the YMCA Rec Center. So, our Wellness 60 Plus classes at the East Hampton Senior Center, we are classes from Monday through Friday with chair yoga, floor yoga, healing circle, qigong, mindfulness meditation, bar, sculpt, and stretch, mindful movement, and balance and self-defense. Our classes at Ashwag Hall include a full day of classes every Wednesday. So you can start Wednesday morning at 12:30 with Qigong 3, osteoporosis and prevention and stretching at 2, and end your day with afternoon yoga with Jackie, which I have done and I recommend. Wellness 60 Plus at the Montauk Playhouse. We have meditation with Lydia on Mondays, Healing Circle with Margaret on Tuesdays. And the Montauk Playhouse has other programs through the Recreation Department. So I've listed pickleball, which they have on Saturday, pickleball for fun, pickleball lessons, and competitive pickleball. And you can visit, for more information regarding recreation programs, you can visit the East Hampton Town website recreation page. In closing, as Kathy mentioned at last week's work session, New York State is seeking your input on the first ever comprehensive survey of older adults. As an older adult, how would you rate the overall quality of life in your community? East Hampton Town seeks your feedback. We're partnering with the New York State Office for the Aging, NYSOFA, on their community assessment survey for older adults. If you are 60 plus, please respond today to help inform future state policies. The survey is anonymous. It only takes 10 to 15 minutes of your time. You can find a link to the survey on the town website Human Services page under Wellness 60 Plus, Meet the Instructors, where you'll find the NYSOFA Community Assessment Survey link. Survey results will help inform state priorities for older adults as NYSOFA prepares its 4-year plan to the federal government, a document which guides service delivery and policy development for aging services program that will support New York's 4.6 million older adults. And I want to add that if you're wondering, how do I know about these programs? You can sign up for notifications by visiting the town website, go to the main page, go to How Do I? And then there's a drop-down window, and then you select notifications, scroll down to calendars, and you can pick any calendars in any department. You can also go to the town website and go to our webpage, and under calendars, we'll list our activities, or you could visit us and also have lunch, which I also highly recommend, and you can pick up a calendar there.
So Diane, what's some of the feedback you're hearing from folks that are participating in these programs? Because they've obviously gotten very robust this year.
Yeah, I actually had someone speak to me yesterday. I believe a woman in her 80s who's told me that she really notices a difference in how she feels. I know over at Ashwag Hall, a lot of people there really enjoy the fact that they can take classes there. Jackie's class had quite a few people at the end of the day. You know, Jackie's beloved in the community. Everyone knows her, and we're really thankful for having her. I do also notice that things are picking up. You know, COVID was difficult for all of us, right? But I think it was pretty hard on the 60 plus community, you know, and so it's taken a while for things to pick up, but I really see the spirit coming back and more people coming to the center and being really excited about all the different classes. And of course, when we get our new building and have more space, there will be room for a lot more to go on at the same time.
Thank you, Diane. I think particularly after COVID, it's really good to get moving again.
I think so.
And important.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm glad you all didn't ask me if I moved, so.
Something every day of the week.
Yeah, that's what we're trying to do. Yeah.
So Diane, if you don't mind, and board members, many of the board might know my backgrounds in kinesiology and sports science, and a lot about the functionality of movement training, as Oscar Giles has said in your presentation, is not just about self-esteem also, which is great, but self-efficacy in your personal movement. And what happens during COVID, when individuals were becoming more sedentary, that affects the systemic pressures that they have from their cardiovascular to their muscular and skeletal strength. Also, during COVID, we saw in the township a lot of fitness centers or gyms close, and because of the shutdowns that they had. But by the town and yourself, Diana, and your department and Kathy's overwatch on them to provide these services right now to 60 plus and such a wide spectrum of it, it's great because as we always talk in many different ways about the health of our community, in different things as far as recreation, building, volunteerism, there is just a functional health of our community that I think that we're providing here too. So I thank you for bringing this forward, and it's good to see people moving and enjoying themselves and socially doing it also. And one step forward, I look forward to seeing these as we move forward in transition into the new senior center and designs, plans, and implementation and construction to continue this and only expand on them. So thank you again.
Oh.
And we should remind people they're free of charge, the classes.
Oh, yes, they're free.
Can't beat that.
No, you can't. Thank you very much.
And can you start signing me up for some of these programs, please? Find some time in the calendar, please.
Thank you, Diane.
Thank you. Next up, we have Governor Hochul's housing proposal, and I had asked our planning department to do a deep dive on the proposal from Governor Hochul regarding housing and what its potential impacts might be on our zoning and our own efforts to improve housing within our community. And so here today with the presentation is Jeremy Samuelson, our Director of Planning.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. And with me is Morgan Slater, who's been with our team, I think now for 7 months or so. I wanted to bring her along as part of this conversation for a couple of different reasons. Morgan is the one who did the really deep dive on the 130 pages of legislation here, and I wanted her to have a chance to share some of her observations and insights with you as well. So we put together a slide deck that you've had a chance to take a peek at. I'd like to walk you through it. I'll move us through the first couple of slides, and then I'd like Morgan to take over from there, and eventually I'll come back in at the end. So as you all know, the conversation around affordable housing has, I think, been very focused for us at the local level on how do we create solutions and what are either the legislative, the financing, or the public outreach elements that are necessary to deliver solutions locally. Parallel with that, I think many people know that Governor Hochul, in each of her last 2 State of the State addresses and then in her most recent budget proposal, has also had a focus on affordable housing. And while I think we all applaud that, I think there's a lot of concern that we have to also put on the table as well, because the specific nature of some of the proposals that the governor has brought forward, I think give us a lot of pause. And we want to make sure that we're naming those for each other and working together to try to find a better path forward. So in general, the governor's proposal was originally folded into, as I said, the budget. The way it works in New York State, as you all know, is that there are some magic dates associated with the budget that come up very early in April. Those sometimes get met in New York State. I think the fair way to put it is they occasionally get met under a prior administration, but most often slip. And so that means that there's some pretty intense negotiations around budget, which happens usually in sort of March, April time period. And of course, that's exactly where we find ourselves now. Fortunately for the conversation around affordable housing, the governor's proposals have been actually taken out of the budget process and essentially spun off as standalone legislation. And the net effect of that for the folks viewing at home is that gives us a longer clock within which these very important conversations can be had. So rather than this being a fire drill where something is supposed to at least theoretically be done by April 1st, this now makes it legislation that gets considered over the next session up in Albany. I think that's the appropriate way to handle this. This is big, important information that, as you'll see in our presentation, is really going to have far-reaching effects should it move forward. So I want to start by actually offering a reminder to the folks at home and as sort of context for this conversation, those in the room, about all of the work that East Hampton Town is currently undertaking. So these are actually active projects that you see on the slide here. And what it boils down to is there's a potential for East Hampton Town to be the leader in creating over 215 or 20 units of housing. And the way you get to that number, and this is in rather short order, the way you get to that number is if you look at the 50 units that are currently being built on Springs Fireplace Road, that's an active
I
project.
think that's 3 Mile Harbor.
Excuse me, I don't know why I inverted that. Thank you so much for that correction, and I apologize. That was an error on my part. 3 Mile Harbor Road, yes, correct. 395 Panago, that's an additional 16 units. As you all know, that's single and separate houses. Route 114, this is very much in the design and development phase. That's an additional 50 units that would eventually be 50 rental apartments. Community Housing Fund, again, as you all know well, was passed by voters to the tune of something like 66% in the town of East Hampton in November. We estimate on a conservative basis that that would bring online something around the order of a minimum of $6 million annually that the town will have to dedicate to affordable housing needs. In addition, possible code changes could result in an additional 100 units of housing that could be brought online in East Hampton Town. Specifically, I'm referring to the accessory affordable apartment legislation that you all have now discussed and have noticed for public hearing on April 20th. So we hope that that will move forward. And in addition, there are other conversations that we've started to have with you from the planning department to the town board that could yield some additional number of units yet to be determined through things like basement apartments in commercial structures. We've already begun talking about limited business overlay and things like that. So I put 100 plus there. When you add all of that up, this points to over 200 units that is being brought online locally to address or begin to address the overall need. Of course, we don't do this work in a vacuum. We rely on partners and benefit from the good work of partners. Katie Casey is here in the room today, so I just wanted to call out that East Hampton Housing Authority and Sag Harbor Community Housing Trust are each partners in much of this work that you see here. So I'm going to hand it over to Morgan now to walk us specifically through what some of Governor Hochul's housing compact proposals are, and then I'll come back up in a few moments.
Thank you, Jeremy. Good afternoon, Morgan.
Good afternoon. How are you guys? So the governor's housing compact can be broken down into 3 phases. The first phase is a mandatory 3% increase in housing for regions that have access to public transportation operated by the MTA. This would require East Hampton to allow for about 600 more housing units within a 3-year period. If this is achieved, then East Hampton would be considered in safe harbor from an appeals process at the state level for denials for qualifying housing applications. If this 3% growth is not achieved, then phase 2 is the next option, which is essentially a pick your poison approach, where we would have to choose from a menu of preferred actions that would loosen restrictions and strip back our zoning laws to allow for housing to be built. This menu consists of 5 preferred actions, and we would have to enact 2 of the 5 in order to be in a safe harbor from that appeals process. If phases 1 and 2 are not achieved, then we are not in safe harbor, and we would have to approve any application that is considered a qualifying project within 120 days. The housing compact defines a qualifying project as an application that is for at least 20 dwelling units, where 20 to 25% of them are affordable, depending on the income requirement. The review of these applications is also limited to determining the ability to provide water, septic, and utilities. If a qualifying project is denied, then the applicant can appeal to the State Housing Review Board, who can essentially overrule our local zoning laws and approve the application anyway. If If the 3% growth in housing stock is not achieved in 3 years, then we will have to change our zoning laws by enacting 2 of the 5 preferred actions. The first preferred action option relates to the loosening of our ADU requirements. The code would have to allow for up to 1,500 square foot ADUs to be built with 4-foot setbacks and no parking requirements, no minimum lot size requirements, no maximum building coverage requirements, and no mandatory updated certificate of occupancy. The second preferred action option is to allow for lot splits and lot line modifications to create more housing lots and therefore increase density. A lot split must be decided administratively and should result in 2 new lots of equal area. There are no explicit size requirements for the lots themselves besides being able to accommodate a 800 square foot residence with 4-foot side and rear yard lot line setbacks. There's also no owner occupancy requirement under this preferred action. The third preferred action option is stripping back the code to remove lot size requirements, height restrictions, and lot coverage restrictions. The fourth preferred action option is to allow for the construction of residential housing with a density of at least 25 units per acre on previously developed land that is equal to 1/3 of the total disturbed land in the town. The last preferred action option is to permit the construction of residential housing at a density of 25 units per acre in an area that previously only allowed for commercial space, and this area should encompass at least 100 acres. SECRA cannot apply to any projects that qualify under these preferred actions, and the town has 120 days to approve projects with a review limited to the ability to provide water, septic, and utilities. Some of our main concerns with this legislation is that it consists of all sticks and no carrots. It is mandating a large amount of development with little aid from the state. The compact includes $250 million to help localities update their infrastructure to accommodate this development. But since many towns on Long Island will need to install public sewage infrastructure in order to achieve this proposed growth, it's likely that $250 million is not sufficient. There's also not much in the legislation that requires new housing to be affordable. Affordable housing is only mandated in phase 3 of this legislation, where the qualifying project requires 20 to 25% of the units to be affordable. The housing compact effectively eliminates home rule and decades of work put into creating our local zoning, building, and environmental regulations. It seems like this legislation overrides any local environmental codes, which would be detrimental to the East End's valuable natural resources, as well as our economy that relies on those natural resources. By eliminating home rule, this legislation is likely to turn any supporters for more housing into opponents. A lot of progress has been made with the public's view on affordable housing in recent years. And if this legislation is passed as it is written, then it will completely undermine all the existing affordable housing efforts made, and the door will be open to developers to build high-density luxury housing. Lastly, this legislation presumes that compounded growth is a solution to the housing crisis. Given the uniquity of real estate in East Hampton, increased housing supply may not guarantee a sufficient decrease in housing cost. The housing compact is just simply incompatible with East Hampton.
Thank you, Morgan.
And Jeremy's gonna finish it off.
So as I mentioned, the proposal that we just reviewed is from the governor's office. It was originally included in the budget and now has been spun off as a standalone piece of legislation. No surprise to, I think, folks who are paying attention to the details that Morgan just shared, there has been a lot of pushback on just even the core assumptions of this proposal and the general approach here. So in particular, folks throughout the Hudson Valley, many of the, all but the largest communities have begun to assemble themselves into a coalition of sorts to stand in opposition. Other municipalities across Long Island have begun similar conversations. As has happened in the past, Assemblymember Thiel has, read this situation, I think, correctly and said there needs to be an alternative path forward here that gets presented. So in the budget negotiations that are currently happening in the state assembly, Member Thiel has actually introduced specific proposals that would take this out of the need for affordable housing, that is, take it out of a mandated set of efforts that would override local zoning planning and instead brought forward a proposal that would rely on incentives. And the centerpiece of his proposal would be $500 million of new direct aid for creating local housing growth plans. And the way this would work is local municipalities would agree to, essentially it's like a grant application almost. They would apply to the program. Upon receipt of the application and determination that it's a viable proposal, 30% of the requested funds would then be turned over from the state to the local municipality to actually execute or begin executing on the plan. There's then a 3-year or up to 3-year period that would commence where the work to create and fulfill the specific goals that are described in the housing plan would then come forward. And at the completion of that work in that period, the balance of the funds, the additional 70%, would actually be paid to the municipality. Critical to this is it's a municipal level project that is put forward, meaning the growth plan. It is thinking that happens in concert and in partnership with the state, but it is done with the values and goals and aspirations of the local community in the plan that they put forward. So very different approach right out of the gate from how the governor has brought this forward. The growth targets under the proposal that Assemblymember Thiel has put forward would be very similar to those in the governor's plan, meaning that there would be 3% growth that would take place across Long Island and throughout the Hudson Valley area that I described earlier. The balance of the state where, really the distinction here is where they're not serviced by the MTA in one fashion or another, would have a 1% growth rate. The overall goal in both plans, meaning what Assemblymember Thiel has put forward and also what the governor has put forward, would be somewhere on the order of 800,000 units that need to be created. Under Assemblymember Thiel's proposal, there would be special consideration for affordability, including things like rehabilitation of abandoned buildings, and there would be an element that focuses on so-called transit-oriented development. As you all know, if you just sort of looked at an aerial of a train station and then drew a map that was a half-mile radius around that, that has become sort of the focal point for much of these conversations around areas like that. So think of East Hampton Village, Amagansett, Montauk within East Hampton Town that would each have one of these circles superimposed on it. Those become the focal area for transit-oriented development. There's a component within the Assembly proposal that would also have funding that's dedicated for that. And there are additional requirements under the governor's proposal that would be superimposed on top of what Morgan talked to you that would be even more onerous. So again, there would be special consideration for those areas as well. But rather critically under the Assembly members plan, again, this would be voluntary. This would be something that would be done on an incentive basis. The total proposed spending that Mr. Thiel has proposed here is actually something along the order of about $1.5 billion, including the $500 million that was mentioned earlier on the page. So, there's a series of programs here that are being proposed. One of the broad messages I would ask you all to take away from this conversation today is that we're really involved or witnessing, I should say, a series of negotiations here. So the governor has put forward what I would describe as a very ambitious and frankly aggressive plan that I think does not work well with the needs of individual municipalities and the designs and goals that we've established for ourselves over the last 70 plus years since zoning was implemented, or roughly 70 years. So we're going to see in the next couple of months, I think, where the Assembly is able to get here in partnership with the Senate. If they keep their work bundled in the budget, then obviously that's going to move a little more quickly. And so this conversation is ongoing, and the governor has staked out a position over on one extreme. I think there's beginning to emerge something that I'll describe as sort of a cooler set of heads that are prevailing here in terms of what a more reasonable approach looks like. I would suggest that we as a municipality need to monitor this closely. Much of our interests and the work that we talk about, even some of the programs that were discussed here today, our ability to continue to be the masters of our own destiny is frankly at stake here. When we start talking about pulling the carpet out from under fundamental concepts of how we operate as a municipality, things like home rule, the ability to establish our own density, our own coverage, our own setback limitations, our own environmental regulations locally, and having all of that power and authority completely ceded to entities that we don't have any role in electing or appointing, I think is a dangerous precedent. And I'm frankly dumbfounded that we've gotten here. It seems to run counter to the core notions of what the relationships and the balance of power should be between local government and the state itself. So we've proposed several next steps for you on our final slide here. The first one is that we'd like to continue working as the supervisor has directed us to do on a formal comment letter to the governor's office that offers some insight and some detail about why we find this to be such a frustrating set of proposals that have been brought forward, but also trying to speak in the affirmative about what we think some better solutions can be here. We would also propose that the town identify and work with like-minded towns and villages so that we have the opportunity to find common cause with natural allies and seek redress as one voice rather than as a multitude of voices that are disparate. We would propose to continue working with Assemblymember Thiel and Senator Palumbo's office to deliver effective housing legislation, funding, and incentives. So, as you all know well, each of their offices are receptive to open dialogue from the municipal level, and we would encourage all of us to continue to pursue that. The town, of course, should continue its all-hands-on housing work that we described earlier, or some of the elements of earlier, and of course, we would look forward to continuing to work together on the Community Housing Fund as well here. I know that you all took steps last week to formally appoint the committee, and I think we're excited to see that work move forward. One final note for you here. It's interesting, the baselines that get established under the governor's proposal basically are a snapshot in time and then propose mandatory growth requirements on top of that. And I think one of the real problematic elements of that approach is that it basically penalizes us for the work that's currently ongoing. So if we grow our housing stock right now, then the total number of units that we would have to create in response to this legislation would actually be even higher. So there's a disincentive here to make progress in the short term on addressing our own affordable housing needs locally as we wait to see what standard might be imposed from without. The second big grumble that I just want to make sure that you all are hearing us share with you as part of this conversation today is there's actually not a requirement in the governor's legislation, except for sort of deep in the weeds of one corner of the room here, if you will, that Morgan flagged for you, that these units would actually be affordable. Mm-hmm. So there's a theoretical possibility here. Let's do the math, right? We have just over 20,000 housing units in East Hampton town. 3% of that is 600. Theoretically, under the governor's proposal, 600 brand new luxury units could get created in East Hampton town that have no affordability associated with them whatsoever. And that could actually count as fulfilling the requirements under the governor's proposal. I think it is wildly off the mark. It completely misses the point and actually potentially harms our ongoing work.
So you've effectively confirmed all my concerns, and and that's why I thought it was important that the entire board spent a little bit of time thinking about this proposal and how we might comment to the governor's office. I think it's important that we do respond, that we focus on alternatives, and talk a bit about what we're doing and what's working here in East Hampton. Because many of these proposals might look good on paper and they might look good somewhere else, but they certainly do not fit here whatsoever. They're completely contrary to what we've tried to do here over the last many decades. And we don't intend to divert from our goal and our pathway, and we need to make sure that we're making available comments as to how the concerns the governor has about housing are shared by us. But some of what her proposal is really about is just building more housing, market rate housing. And we don't need more market rate housing here. I think we're the poster child for no more market rate housing and maybe some not market rate housing to balance things out, because no one who works within this market can afford to live in this market anymore. I think that's a fair statement to make. It's this is about housing has really become, as someone spoke earlier, I think it was Mr. Levy speaking about how we're at a crucial point. He was complaining about house size and how every square inch of a property was being developed for residential, and that East Hampton risks becoming a commodity instead of a community. And I think that's really where we are now. We are trying to balance and maintain a community, and we see the pressures across the board, from whether it's volunteer ambulance to hospital, schools, municipality being able to hire and retain staff. People who've lived here for generations no longer able to do so. So that's as far as I'm concerned, that's our mission and our goal, is to maintain our community. And this does little to toward that goal, help that goal.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really important to enumerate to the governor and highlight the unintended consequences that will happen with this proposal, and how it will actually reverse her goals in municipalities like ours. I can't imagine in a state the size of New York that anyone would think that a one-size-fits-all approach is the right way to go, and not have have not brought on representatives from municipalities to as a work group on how this would work. Where that is missing is where it needs to be implemented. You can't sit in a room and come up with ideas without looking at having others, municipalities, and particularly in such a big state, talk about their challenges and what works and what doesn't. And it's really misguided to ignore that type of collaboration.
I'll just add quickly, I find it interesting that, in eliminating all building codes, you would be eliminating any of our energy sustainability efforts that we have in all of our building codes. So, and any issues for clean water. So it seems contradictory on one hand of things that the governor is trying to do and move energy sustainability forward, but she's taking it away with the other. So I think that should be maybe highlighted as something that is there. And I didn't see, and if Morgan may have done some deep dives into ADUs, whether or not they could be rented or not, because what we're just doing is building rental for Verbo or Airbnb or any of the others, which is really taking away from our hotels and other businesses that we have here locally. And so I think it really impacts them. And that should also be highlighted.
So my understanding of the legislation is that units that count towards your demonstration of the underlying number can't be occupied on a seasonal basis. They're meant to be occupied on a year-round basis, but that is not the same thing, I think, to your broader point here, as being either affordable or addressing the actual needs of the community.
Yeah, and the fact that, obviously Long Island has a higher, has to do the 3% increase in units because of the MTA. I mean, you try to take the train to the city this time of year, you can count on one hand, how many trips there are, and if you want to go at midnight. I mean, it's just insane. It's really so missing the mark.
Well, I did have the opportunity when I missed the meeting a couple Thursdays ago and had the opportunity to speak directly with the governor. And that's what I expressed to her was, transit-oriented development's fine, but you have to have transit first. And
Yeah.
we have a woefully underserved, we're woefully underserved by LIRR, and something we've been working with our representatives to improve. But I got to tell her firsthand, get us some more trains, put some infrastructure in, invest in that first, and then we can talk about, transit-oriented development.
Yeah, the transit-oriented development, I'm really happy that each of you picked up on this point, because the whole notion of transit-oriented development, I think it was Katie in a conversation yesterday was talking about how that's kind of the current version of what used to get referred to as smart growth, and this whole notion of
urbanization.
right. So if you've got the hubs and then you put the people there and it's very walkable, and then you take the train maybe into the city to go to work. The idea that we would be subject to a standard that is somehow built on the idea that because you can take a train to the city, I think is laughable on its face.
Once a day, maybe.
Yeah.
But what it really will do in the real world will increase traffic to an insane. We don't have the infrastructure to be able to deal with that much density in a town center.
Right. And so let's just, forgive me, I want to spell out one example here for anyone who's watching at home, because I think this might be sort of the aha moment here. If you look at the Amagansett train station and you draw a half-mile circle in every direction around that, and then you say the state is essentially proposing to impose a new downtown a half mile in every direction around the Amagansett train station, for which we would have no local authority to decide what goes in there and what doesn't, as long as we could provide drinking water, septic service, and utilities. That's basically what's being proposed here. I think that would, without being hyperbolic, be the death of our community. The point of this legislation should not be to turn every place into any place.
Jeremy, can I ask a question? So sorry, I'm away. Has there been any discussion from the governor's proposal, or even the assemblyman's proposal, about how the funding sources would work with the fair and equitable housing laws, as far as preferential treatment of classes, or if we've been able to give preferences to local residents out here with that funding?
I know of no connection between those two conversations. That doesn't mean it doesn't exist. I just don't know of any way to put them together for you.
Thank you.
Thank you all for your time.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Thanks, Morgan.
Thank you, Morgan.
Well done, Morgan.
Yep. Thanks.
And good job giving Morgan credit for that. It says a lot about you as a department head.
Surround yourself with smart people.
Yeah, exactly. Well, hey, what can I say? Exactly right, Jeremy. Okay, next we have the proposed scenic and conservation easement for Chamillo. John, you're going to walk us through that?
Basically, this is just the requirement of the town's urban renewal map. Sheet EH7 has a requirement that parcels that are along Hands Creek Road have a 50-foot scenic easement. And it's been in the map, from what I can see, I think since the maps were adopted in the 1970s. And so the submission of the easement is in compliance with the UR map. This is actually the parcel here, and the easement would be along Sands Creek Road. The easement has to be amended to be in the name of the LLC that owns it, which I think was Precision. I have to look back, but we had talked about it at the meeting. So that's going to be amended, but that's why this is a, the town board's required easement, because it's on the UR maps.
So, questions or comments? Seems pretty straightforward.
That hearing, what did you say? It's the 4th, right? It's the 6th, April 6th. Didn't we notice this?
No,
Oh, I thought we noticed it and then we were bringing it back.
I thought we noticed it as amended.
I thought we noticed it.
Did we amend it? Oh, we did amend it.
To include
you have
the
it, okay. I don't know. I haven't been right on the other resolutions I looked at so far, so I'm not sure. I
No,
think
because
may
we
have
did
noticed
pull
it.
the other one. So this
We did pull the other one.
We did.
Ah,
but
okay.
Not this one.
Not
Not
this
this,
one.
okay.
Yeah.
All right. So yes, it'll have to be amended, and of course, we can't accept it until such time as we get the amendment back signed by the property owner.
So the last agenda item today is proposed stop sign additions at the intersection of South Edison and South Elmwood. This was a request received by the town board, specifically David Lease, who's the Montauk liaison. This is a highly trafficked area with both vehicles and quite a few pedestrians, given its proximity to the beach. And so it was felt that a four-way stop is most appropriate at this intersection here in downtown Montauk. South Edison, as you know, continues to the south to the ocean there.
That is correct, Peter. Thank you very much. This was discussed a couple different times at the Montauk Citizens Advisory Committee. Thank you, Ann, for showing this. Currently, this intersection of South Elmwood is only from north to south, have stop signs. The recommendations, request is to put stop signs on the eastern and west aspect of it, which will be very similar to what's already on South Elmwood and South Edgemere. Both these intersections also have sidewalks that actually go up to the highway. This specific area of South Edison also, there's a lot of pedestrian traffic which goes down towards the town beach, the town bathrooms, and also to some of the eateries which are on South Etna. So the concerns were straight from public safety in there. You sit there on a summer day, you'll see some confusion. People want to stop for each other, but this would be putting the stop signs in these two separate locations on there. Not much more to say besides that. I've talked to both Chief Sarla and also Steve Lynch. They both agree that it would be a good addition for public safety also.
Thank you, David. Any questions, comments from board members? Board members supportive of this?
Supportive of, we're holding a public hearing.
Yes,
right?
of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, I am supportive as well.
Yeah.
Support moving forward with the public hearing?
Yep.
Thank you. I will get ready, a resolution ready for that.
Excellent. That concludes our agenda topics. We have liaison reports.
I have a brief report. The folks at Human Services wanted me to make two announcements. One is about the deadline for applying for HEAP. That's the Home Energy Assistance Program. And that is the end of this month, March 31st. It helps eligible New Yorkers heat and cool their homes. And it's based on income, household size, primary heating source, and the presence of a household member who is under age 6, age 60 or older, or permanently disabled. So if folks have questions and think they may be eligible, they should reach out to our Human Services Department and speak with our case manager, Liliana Rodriguez, at 631-329-6939. And then United Way just offered up a new program. It's called United Way's Home Modification Program, and it offers home safety adjustments, small home repairs, healthy homes evaluations, accessibility modifications, fall protection hazards and modifications. And it's for those 62 or older who own their homes, but there are some income qualifications that need to be met. So again, if some folks are interested in that program, they should reach out to Liliana at Human Services. Again, 631-329-6939. And then last Friday, the Disability Advisory Board met, and they talked about when and with whom we're going to be replacing the town disabilities officer. You recall Tom Rule served in that position for a number of years. And I had said, first we need to fill the position for the department head of housing and community development, and then we could see if that's a good fit. So I asked them to be patient, and they were fine with that. The other thing we talked about was the use of the ADA funding for town projects. Wanted to know what was, on deck right now, and mentioned that we're moving forward with the making this doorway here, the emergency access for those with disabilities. We're going to be putting in a ramp. We also talked about making the entrance to town hall more safe and secure by putting in handrails
around the brickwork, and so that nobody falls off the path as they're walking to or from town hall. That, I believe, is going out. We're using a contract to do that, so that's going to be one project, and I believe Jeannie's going to be doing the purchase order on that like within the next few days. And then the other thing we talked about was that we're going to be replacing the main doors here at town hall, because apparently when they originally went in, they were not wide enough to be ADA compliant. So that is going to have that's a separate project. David, I know that's something that you've been working on with James Pincott, but it just came up with the folks at the DAB. So I figured I'd bring it up in my liaison report.
Thanks,
and that's what I've got.
Thank you. David, do you have a report today?
I do briefly, thank you. Also, just to add on to the ADA improvements in Montauk, we're working on many of the actual ramps that have been well used in Montauk to get them up to ADA compliance too. I want to let the board know that the Water Quality Technical Advisory Committee met last week. They were reviewing round 1 from 2023, moving steadily forward with that with new members and also the new chair, William Hajak. We will be bringing that to the town board with recommendations probably in April. We're going to have a couple more meetings on that as we move forward with the grading. Last week, the town internal committee has been continuing conversations with Lake Montauk bottomland leases. There are many leases in some of the areas of Lake Montauk that commercial entities have leased in the past that have either been expired, and we're working on a very fair and equitable way to explore those leases. Some individuals are asking for more lease grounds, some are just expired, and we're working through those templates also. Let me see. And lastly, I want to thank the members of the Amagansett Village Improvement Society. I sat in their executive meeting yesterday where we discussed actions that they're doing on the behalf of Amagansett, beautification projects, thinning of trees that they're working on Main Street and other lanes, tree protection. They were interested in that, and also about the Amagansett Plains management plan also. So I thank them. The organizations work very, very, very astutely over the years and their memberships for keeping Amagansett beautified and wonderful to live in and to enjoy and recreate. Lastly, we also just received an email then too. It's been announced that the South Fork commuter connection actually is going to be running year-round on Fridays now. This hadn't been. We will put that out, I know, onto some of our messaging town platforms, but they'll be running on Fridays now, where typically it stopped from Memorial Day to Labor Day, but they're going to be running year-round. I think it goes back to what the supervisor was saying about trying to get the MTA to increase accessibility through trains out here also. So we can continue that, maybe more steps forward to how we can use our mass transit systems to better offset our carbon footprint and also our affordable housing needs. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David. Sylvia?
Yeah, I'll start with the Anti-Bias Task Force. We did a movie on Sunday at 2:30. It was Best of Enemies. We had about 25 people that came to the movie. It was free at the East Hampton Library. So I want to thank the East Hampton Library for providing the room for us and having someone there that can do all the audio visual things that made me feel much more comfortable in doing it. Arthurine Dunn was there, and a high school teacher in the English department. She also led a discussion after the movie. The movie was pretty tough to watch. It is a true story based in North Carolina during the 70s. And so she spoke about her experiences growing up in Alabama, and she saw some of the same things that had happened to her as a child that was happening in this movie as well. So it was a pretty interesting conversation with her, and thank her husband too for coming and supporting her. James was there as well, another wonderful member of our community. The diversity show, we're going to do a new one again this month, and thank Chief Mike Tracy for that. He always puts them together and helps us find new people to interview. And on May the 7th, Sunday again at 2:30, working with East Hampton Library, we're going to do a Latino-inspired movie. We're looking at different options right now, so I can't announce the movie yet, but I think we have plenty of time for that, and hope we get as many folks there as we did for Best of Enemies. So the Arts Council also did their creative networking night, and we did that also at the Baldwin Room at the East Hampton Library. We had almost 100 people show up.
Oh, that's great.
So it was packed. If you want to know how arts are doing in East Hampton, they're doing very well. So it was a great event, lots of fun, lots of laughter, and some real deep dive into some of our local artists and how they perform and how they are inspired by what they see around us. And many of them, so we started it off with just talking about Brooks Park, because we wanted to see the response from that group of artists that was there, and everyone raised their hand when we asked if they were familiar with and wanted to see Brooks Park continue in its restoration process. So that was another good event, and I think part of it was because of COVID. I think, as Kate was saying earlier, when Diane Patrizio, we want to kind of all get back together. We want to be together again. The Tree Society, which is the Wayne Scott Tree Society, is planning on planting 4 trees, 2 on Main Street and 2 on Hollow Road. They will be buying the trees and picking the trees from Whitmore's. And I've also contacted Superintendent of Highway Steve Lynch, and he said no, he will waive the fees for them, and they will perform markouts so that we know exactly where the markouts are on the right of way. So I just wanted you to be up to date on what the Tree Society was doing. And thank you to Amagansett for the Amagansett Parade on Saturday. Joan Tulp and Hugh King were the head of the parade, and it was fun to be with them, and thank Patty Sales and Joy Jackson for all the work they do every year to get the green line painted and green and white cupcakes handed out. So it was lots of fun, and lots of folks were there, including David. I got to see you and your whole family. So it was really nice. Thanks.
Thank you, Sylvia. Kate?
Yes, first, I would like to let the community know that we need your help and your opinion for plotting out our next roadmap for renewable energy and our climate goals. There is a survey. We had a presentation last week on the survey, and the survey link is up on the energy sustainability page of the town website. Just go to the search on the front page, put in energy sustainability, and you'll see the link and a QR code to the survey. And this survey will help have a community-driven roadmap for East Hampton for our goals for the future. So I ask really that you take a moment and fill out the survey. It'll also be going out. If you get notifications from the town, you'll see it come up either via text or email. Please just take a moment. It's not that long, and help us determine our goals for the foreseeable future for energy sustainability and renewable energy. And just right there, I'll say that the new IPCC report from the United Nations on climate once again reduces the time for action for reducing the impacts that are coming down the line. So what we do in the next 10 years in the town, even to the present, is crucial for a sustainable future for us all. So please take a moment out and participate in action on the climate crisis by filling out the survey. Our composting pilot project work group had their first meeting. The members included 2 members of the Energy Sustainability Committee, the chair and the secretary who's in the audience today, Gloria. And also, I want to thank folks from the school district. That's Aubrey Peterson, who was on the call directing how the students can participate in composting and food scraps diversion from the waste stream, which is the goal. It's diverting food scraps from the waste stream is really the townwide goal. It's also a goal, a regional goal, as I'll explain. Also, Ian Calder Piedmont was there, helping us on a project involving farms in East Hampton, and either reducing what goes into the waste stream by, as they do on his farm, allowing folks to shuck their corn and get rid of their green tops and anything that they're not going to be using from CSA or purchases at the point of purchase, which I think is a really great idea. And he'll be helping us develop all the programs as well. We had Mark Harbour, who will be coming to a work session and giving us some educational data on diverting waste and how much waste, food scrap waste, actually goes into our waste stream. And Mary Morgan. And these folks develop pilot programs that were successful on the North Fork, because, we really also would like East Hampton to be part of the solution for a bioregion approach, something like PEP. The Peconic Estuary Program, where we really look at ourselves as a part of a larger unit, and what we can do in the community as well. So that was very encouraging. We're setting up a weekly meeting schedule for that project.
So Kate, have you reached out to Diane Patrizio and Michelle Basilico so that we could be making sure we're doing that at the senior center, and then Diane could put you in touch with the folks at the Montauk Playhouse to do the Montauk Nutrition
Yeah,
Program?
we spoke about that as one of our goals. Actually, Mark was very excited to be looking at something from the ground floor in the new senior center, and he will help reduce our waste.
We could start now.
His idea for now, what exists now, and even for the future, for even restaurants and for any place where we're serving food, it begins actually with planning and purchasing. So you're not buying more than you need. You're keeping data on what you need. So it begins way before you get to the point of serving and what goes into the waste stream. So he'll be putting together a program that we'll be coming to all of you with.
Awesome.
For that. Yeah, we were really excited to talk about.
I don't think we get too ahead of ourselves at the senior center because we don't have the storage.
Yeah, that's great.
Capacity.
That actually
So,
works for
yeah.
this project. And because that's one of the problems is the planning and purchasing. It starts there, even for households, how much you're buying, how much you're anticipating for that week. Just planning it out better can make a huge difference. We also had a meeting with the folks from Relic, the Montauk Chamber of Commerce, on the beach cleanup pilot program, where we're supplying the baskets for individuals to take to their local beach blanket setup and be able to throw their trash into the basket, carry it out. That's a pilot program that will be happening in Montauk and at Atlantic Avenue Beach. The kickoff will be on Earth Day, and in the future before that, we'll be having a town board presentation on what that will look like as well. This is sponsored by the Natural Resources Department. We had our Energy Sustainability Committee meeting. It was a very robust meeting. It was a reformatting of the committee with the development of subcommittees. Folks signed up for subcommittees such as land use, sustainable landscaping, community education, electrification, advocacy, recycling, composting, and there was a robust response from the committee members. People divided up into subcommittees. Again, I have to thank Gloria and Paul Muniz, who's our chair, They set a very robust series of priorities for 2023. We're going to kick off with a forum on sustainable landscaping in April. I'll have more information on that. And they'll be taking on a lot of topics in response to the IPCC. So it was really a wonderful meeting with them. They also discussed some code changes as well that we can take a look at to help promote more sustainability in our codes. And that's what I have.
So Kate, I know that South Fork Wind has been attempting
Oh,
to
I'm sorry. I
pull
left
the
South Fork
cable.
Wind out. I don't know how I did that. It's on
They
the.
now have revised to Wednesday. They're going to
Yes,
try again.
I'm sorry, Peter. It's
No, it's quite all right.
actually on the top of my list.
I knew you were going to talk about it. And
No, I went right to the excitement about the survey. Yes, South
I'm going
Fork.
to count that as part of my liaison report today.
Thank you, Peter,
So
for
much.
that. So Wednesday, the cable pool, onshore cable pool is scheduled for this coming Wednesday. It'll be contiguous until they're finished about Sunday. Finally got some good weather. They've been trying to schedule this. It's weather dependent. It's actually the last large action of the construction of the onshore cable. And after that, immediately we'll begin taking down all which they've already started, the sound wall and remaining equipment on Beach Lane. The rest of the route for the cable has had their final paving. The last bit was the part where they cross Montauk Highway. There, you'll see signs up with flashing lights. They don't have the information on that yet. That will be upcoming, weather dependent. And then they'll pave Beach Lane and then start the final landscaping restoration project in the road right-of-ways. Thank you, Peter.
You're welcome. And while we're talking about wainscot and cable, the lift boat's still there. And somebody just sent me, one of the trustees just sent me a photograph with the lift boat, but in the foreground is the cut. They've opened the pond. It's an annual sign of spring.
Okay.
When the pond is opened up to the sea to allow crabs and fishes to enter the pond for the summer. It's something that's taken place, I think, for hundreds and hundreds of years, maybe thousands of years. As I understand it, the original inhabitants of East Hampton would open the pond in the spring, and again in the fall. The surveying is completed. We've completed the surveying along the portion of downtown Montauk Beach that requires easements for the replenishment project. As I've mentioned before, we had requested that the project be extended to the east all the way to Shadmore. The Army Corps of Engineers has agreed to do that, and so we've been compiling the surveys necessary to acquire the easements going forward for that sand replenishment. So that portion's on schedule. We still have a little more work to do in order to get the project to go. Some of that obviously is going to be dependent on the Army Corps of Engineers moving forward, but I think we're getting much closer to that. And that's all I have for today. So we have a few resolutions today. Kathy, you have the
So resolution 2023-439 is to appoint maintenance mechanic 2 in human services, Thomas Malore, and the salary is $48,131.62 annually for a 40-hour work week effective March 27th.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So carried.
440 is a reclassification and promotion for Isaac Lopez to maintenance mechanic 3 in the Human Services Department. The annual salary is $65,033.28 for a 40-hour work week, and this is effective retroactive to March 1st.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That's carried.
I'd like to offer resolution 2023-441, provisional appointment to environmental technician Mindy Snyder. She'll be environmental technician in the land management department. Mindy, hourly rate of $25.91, which is $53,894 $0.67 for a 40-hour work week, paid bi-weekly, effective March 23rd, 2023.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So carried.
I'd like to offer resident, my doorbell's ringing.
You want me to do it?
No, I got it. I'm just
You wanna
laughing.
get that, David?
I just laughing. I'd like to offer resolution 2023-442. This is amend chapter 240, section 240-61, schedule 11 for parking prohibited at all times. This is on the east side of Town Line Road, from the southerly road end, a distance of 60 feet north.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That's carried. Could be Publishers Clearinghouse sweepstakes winner.
Yeah.
Better get that door, Dave.
Exactly. 443 is a SEPT proposal for RFP EH 2023-106. This is improvements of town areas with public internet and Wi-Fi and public visible cameras to Saunders Broadcasting Corporation.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That's carried.
2023-444 is amendment resolution 2023-388, whereas the approval of the payment of 388 was to McCluskey Mechanical. The dollar amount was improper. Please make the payment to be authorized to McCluskey Mechanical in the amount of $1,486.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That's carried.
445 retain L.K. McLean Associates for professional engineering services for the re-roof of the Harbor Masters building design fee and support. The proposal was dated March 9th, 2023. An estimated cost of $5,200 for the project and construction support at an estimated cost of $4,300 for the project for the total sum of $9,500.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That's carried.
I have lost part of my, sorry. Resolution 2023-443 is to accept a reproposal of an RFP EH 2023-106.
446.
We're on
Oh.
446.
Okay, sorry. I don't know how I got off. 446 is to amend resolution 2023-303, release security for urban renewal parcel 25C in EH 1732 Thomas Avenue, East Hampton. And the amount is $12,000.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
That's carried.
Resolution 447, we are going to pull that because it was put in error. And we will have a work session agenda item on April the 4th.
So you're gonna make a motion to withdraw it?
So I make a motion to withdraw it.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We can
That's-
but there'll be a new resolution to replace it, so we don't need to table it.
Okay, I have resolution 448, which is to amend resolution 2023-421, which is Michelle Fields payout. Whereas on resolution 2023-421, Michelle Fields' gross payout was calculated at $3,494.05 without the prorated stipend to which she's entitled. Therefore, be it resolved, Michelle Fields' total gross payout with the added prorated stipend in the amount of $254.77 is $3,748.82.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Pass carried. Resolution 449 is promotion of heavy equipment operator for Joshua Davidson. And that is at an hourly rate of $29.51. Grade 23, step 5, annual salary of $61,414, 40-hour work week, retroactive to March 10th.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
That's carried. 450 is a budget modification for South Fork Commuter Connection Hampton Hopper service. And that is an increase in revenue on the state aid other in the amount of $148,168.56. And moving to an expense line, subcontractors in the same amount.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That's carried. Resolution 451 is to authorize payments past due invoices to Regano LLC. They total $28,830.77.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So carried. We have a few additional resolutions.
I have resolution 2023-452, and that's termination of an employment of employment effective March 22nd.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Carried.
2023-453 is to appoint Legislative Secretary Chelsea Walker at the annual salary of $57,000 for a 35-hour work week effective March 23rd.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passed and carried.
I'd like to offer Resolution 2023-454. This is appoint Harbor Master 1 to the Marine Patrol, Melanie Anderson, where the contract position was posted. Melanie Anderson will be hired at an hourly rate of $31.63, grade 28 starting step, which is $65,797.89 annually for a 40-hour work week effectively March 21st, 2023.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Passed and carried. We have a few items to discuss in exec session today.
I do. I move that we go into exec session for personnel, contracts, and advice of counsel.
Second.
CPF also, please, too.
Oh, it's
And
CPF.
CPF, there was, yep. And CPF.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Passed and carried. So we can reconvene at 2:15 work for folks.
That's good.
I will send the link.
Yep.
Thanks very much. LTV, stay safe.